in some ways serve them well, in some ways serve them less well. So I'd like to talk about this at the level of the individual and interactions between pairs and larger groups and so on. But just to kick things off, what is cynicism? I have my own ideas, but what is cynicism? What does it serve in terms of its role in the human mind?
The way that psychologists think of cynicism these days is as a theory about human beings. It's the idea that generally people at their core are selfish, greedy, and dishonest. Now, that's not to say that a cynical person will deny that somebody could act kindly, for instance, could donate to charity, could help a stranger. But they would say all of that kind and friendly behavior is a thin veneer covering up who we really are, which is self-interested. Another way of putting this is, there are these ancient philosophical questions about people. Are we good or bad, kind or cruel, caring or callous? And cynicism is answering all of those in the relatively bleak way that you might.
I believe in your book, you quote Kurt Vonnegut, who says, "We are who we pretend to be, so we need to be careful who we pretend to be." What do you think that quote means? How do you interpret that quote?
Thanks for bringing that up. Kurt Vonnegut, one of my favorite authors. And to me, that quote is enormously powerful because it expresses the idea of self-fulfilling prophecies. There's this subjective sense that people have that our version of the world is the world, that we are passively taking in information veridically, dispassionately. And in fact, that's not the case. We each construct our own version of the world. And so, for instance, if you think about cynicism, right, are people kind or cruel? That's pretty much an unanswerable question at the level of science. It's a philosophical, some could argue even a theological question. But it turns out that the way you answer that goes a long way in constructing and shaping the life that you live, the decisions that you make. So cynics, maybe it's not so much about who they pretend to be, but it's about who they pretend everybody else is, right? If you decide that other people are selfish, for instance, you'll be far less likely to trust them. And there's a lot of evidence that cynics, when they're put in situations with new people, even when they interact with their friends, romantic partners, and families, that they still have their guard up, that they're not able to make trusting and deep connections with other people. But guess what? When you treat other people in that way, a couple of things happen. One, you're not able to receive what most of us need from social connections. There's one really classic and very sad study where people were forced to give an extemporaneous speech about a subject they don't know much about, a very stressful experience that raised people's blood pressure. Some of these folks had a cheerleader, not an actual cheerleader, but a friendly stranger who was with them while they prepared, saying, "You've got this. I know you can do it. I'm in your corner." Other people had no support. As you know, one of the great things about social support is that it buffers us from stress. So most people, when they had this friendly person by their side, their blood pressure as they prepared for the speech went up only half as much as when they were alone. But cynical people had a spike in their blood pressure that was indistinguishable in magnitude, whether or not a person was by their side or not. One way that I think about this is social connection is a deep and necessary form of psychological nourishment. And living a cynical life, making the decision that most people can't be trusted, stops you from being able to metabolize those calories, leaves you malnourished in a social way. A second thing that happens when you choose to pretend that others are selfish, greedy, and dishonest is that you bring out the worst in them. There's a lot of research that finds that cynical people tend to do things like monitoring others, spying on them, or threatening them to make sure that that other person doesn't betray them. But of course, other people can tell how we're treating them, and they reciprocate our kindness and retaliate against our unkindness. So cynical people end up bringing out the most selfish qualities of others, telling a story full of villains and then ending up stuck living in that story.
How early in life